We're talking about adults or young adults. When you're doing something, when do you make the distinction that what I'm doing deserves to be quit? And I don't know if I should leave the question like that, or if I should spin it as a more personal thing. Where is there a time in your life where you were doing something where and then at some point during doing it, you're like, do I keep doing this or do I quit completely? I'm not redirecting what I'm doing. I'm just leaving this here. I'm walking away for whatever reason.
Yeah, totally.
So in your case, Teo, if you don't mind, what was the scenario that you wanted to quit something, and did you quit or not, and why or why not?
So in my teenage years, I played a lot of tennis. That was kind of my life. I started homeschooling when I was in grade 8, just so I could do tournaments and train and stuff. And that was everything. And I was lined up to try and get a tennis scholarship in the States. That was sort of my plan after graduating high school. And then when I was about 18, I rolled my ankle and then got in a car accident and I was out for a long time. And then just decided that that I didn't really want to be a tennis player, and that I had this like long stagnant vision for myself of being a professional tennis player that was kind of, I just stopped identifying with, and I decided to pursue school, knowledge, learning, because my brain will be active, hopefully, for, most of my life, which hopefully is long. Whereas, a life as an athlete, peaks for like 10 years and then falls off. But yeah, so I decided to just stop playing tennis. And actually I did quit like cold turkey. I played a ton, like every day, hours a day, and then just stopped. And I haven't really played much since.
And how long did it take you to make that decision? So you kind of said that you rolled your ankle, and I don't know if that caused you to get in a car accident, or you rolled your ankle and you got in a car accident as two independent incidents.
Right. But, two independent incidents.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just two subsequent things that inhibited your ability for tennis for a bit. And so how long were like, because it's kind of a thing. There's kind of an interesting thing, at least for me, where did those events make you not be able to play for 8 months? You had 8 months to think, or was it kind of like I could have played within like 2 weeks of it happening, but I just like immediately thought, no, I'm not doing this. Like, how fast was that resolution for you?
Well, what happened was like I was like really tunnel visiony on the tennis for like a few years, and then rolled my ankle, and I was up for about 3 months from that. And then I got in a car accident and actually got a concussion that was not very nice, and so I was out for a few months on top of that. And all that time I was reading, started learning the cello, started teaching myself the piano and stuff. And I had a lot more time to think, and I think I pursued I had the same tunnel visiony approach on music and thinking and writing and stuff. And once my body recovered, I just, I got used to sort of the more sedentary lifestyle, I guess.
So you would kind of say that it was you kind of just fell out of love with it because you couldn't do it. You kind of were doing these other things and just kind of happened to at one point realize I'm enjoying these other things and I don't necessarily need tennis. Is that kind of the scenario or the kind of the thought process that went through?
A void was created by injury, and I filled the void with other things. Yeah.
How about you, Gunnar?
Well, like I dropped out of college the first time I went there, but it's nothing as dramatic or I didn't have as much reasoning behind it as Teo. I just didn't like where I was, what I was doing, the amount of money that I was spending on doing it. I just felt like it was counterproductive to what I was trying to do. So I just kind of cut that cord after the first unsuccessful semester that I had trying to be an engineer.
So that just kind of sounds like you looking at school being like, fuck you thinking I'm not good enough. I'm just leaving then and not giving you $3,000.
Yeah, kind of, I guess. Yeah, in a way. But yeah, the main reason for that was because it, and I identified it later, was that it wasn't necessarily the learning that I didn't like, but it was I was living in Penticton at the time and commuting about an hour north every day to Kelowna and back and forth every single day. And so I'd spend about 2 hours of my day just commuting. And then that ate up a ton of gas money and so on and so forth. So it was just really unenjoyable because of the drive. It wasn't anything to do with like learning or anything. It was kind of the drive that I hated.
And for either of you, it sounds like this quitting experience was never like, and this is kind of something I find actually really quite fascinating to listen to. It sounds like neither of you had difficulty quitting. It was kind of like, it just seemed organic. It was never like a struggle. Like I kind of imagine Teo sitting there saying, man, I put all my cards into being a professional tennis player. I was going to be the male Serena Williams, and I was going to go and be a world champion, and everyone would know my name. And okay, I guess that's not, I guess I actually, now that I think about it, I don't want that. I saw Teo, you shaking your head.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that straightforward at the time. I think just several years after that, so it's easy for me to just summarize it. But at the time, no, I was really confused, and I had totally identified with being an athlete and tennis player, and that's who I am, that's who I'm going to be. So I was very, very lost, and in terms of my identity, I didn't like immediately identify with, oh, I'm someone who thinks and I'm a musician or whatever. I felt pretty lost, confused, but I knew what I like to do. I like to play music and do that. But so I had a significant drop of confidence after quitting tennis.
And I don't know if maybe for me it was like the things that I think about are just so, like the struggle for me was so easy, like strong was, I don't know if that's the right word I want to use, but I can remember like almost going through the every single motion of going from doing something to finally saying, hey, I'm quitting. And most of the things that I've actually quit were like a 3 to 4 year plus long decision. And so for me, like I can kind of, if I think about it for a couple seconds, I can kind of think about how I came to that decision. Like I can kind of almost pinpoint it down to one moment that made me, or two moments that kind of made me realize, okay, this isn't the best thing. Like there is some sort of story behind how I came to terms to realize that quitting was the best option. So for you, Teo, like going from tennis being your everything to not, is there a single moment or at least a span of time where you can think that these kind of decisions made me come to realize that quitting was okay? Or is it just kind of so confusing and so complex that you just kind of woke up one day and realized?
I don't. I think there were probably a few moments. I only remember one that made me realize that the world was bigger than it was. My future included more than just tennis, or it could include more than just tennis. And I remember driving home from a tournament. I was like 16. My mom was driving, and at that point, I started to write a little bit. I was doing a bit of writing, and my mom had mentioned, sort of in passing, that I had some skill at it, and that like I was good at writing, and that it would be worth pursuing it. And that moment sticks out to me just as saying like, oh yeah, I have other skills that I could put my energy to, and just moments like that. Having an affinity for the cello. When I started taking lessons, I took to it reasonably quickly, and just like, oh, okay, I can do other things than play tennis.
Yeah. You mentioned you're coming back from a tournament, so that was prior to any of your accidents?
Yeah.
So was the cello prior to any of your accidents? Like, did you start learning that before, or was that only after?
The cello was after. The writing was a bit before.
So you kind of realized that you had this creative side to you,
right,
nested within this athlete while you were still an athlete.
Yeah.
So do you think that helped with the like cushioning the blow at all? Because it kind of it replaced a crutch almost, like one thing for another.
Yeah, I think it did. I think I actually wrote a lot when I was injured. So that yeah.
I would flip it over to Gunnar, but hey Gunnar, do you have another thing you quit? Because man, your I quit school was so rational that that I don't really have much more to extrapolate, and I feel like I'm going to go down to a therapy hole with Teo, going through his life story of how he became the person he is today.
Or is anything else that I quit? I have no idea. Not off the top of my head, I can't think of much.
I mean, how did you feel about being an engineer? Like, did you identify with that? Is that something that you really wanted to do?
Not really. Like, it was something that I went into half-heartedly, so it wasn't very difficult to remove myself from the situation. But yeah, like, I really, like, I don't know anything that I've actually quit that I've been like, oh my God, I miss this so much, because I just keep doing everything that I do.
See the one thing
except school.
The one thing I find interesting about Gunnar, like just from what I know of him, is that it seems
actually,
oh,
I have something. I recently, this is something that I quit, is that I was trying to be a doctor for a long time, and I recently kind of gave up on that idea. So I guess in a way I've quit the pursuit of medicine. So that's something.
Well,
and that's a big thing.
Yeah.
We can unpack that a bit more. But I feel like, again, this was something that I came into a bit rationally, because maybe this is me rationalizing it, right? Because I just, once I got into like the university and post-secondary, and especially into my grad studies, I kind of got a better, more clear idea of the things that I wanted. And so I guess this might be like with time, with age, you kind of get to know yourself a bit better. And the job that I had signed up for to go to school for, I was kind of under the impression that you would get to spend a lot of time with people, right? And this is something that I've heard is a common criticism with doctors and physicians nowadays, is that they don't get to spend that patient face-to-face time very often, unless they're like really specialized. And it's typically like 90% of your day is doing paperwork. So the reason for me quitting this was to preempt something that I realized I hate doing, which is paperwork. And I learned this in my grad studies because there's so much bureaucracy that is associated with it that like I had no idea beforehand. And I couldn't stand that side of it. And I couldn't imagine myself spending 75%, 90% of my time and effort doing that rather than helping people. And I guess one of the ways that I came to this conclusion was that a lot of like my mentors and colleagues and stuff said, well, there's other ways to help people, right? You don't have to specifically help them in this medical capacity, even though that's kind of like, I suppose, a fantasy that I held to help them in that context, because health is such an important aspect. How better to help people than improving their health? But I've kind of accepted the idea that there's other ways to help people that doesn't involve getting an MD, and that it really wasn't for me in the first place. So I guess those would be the reasons why. So preemptively.
So see, that's what I find interesting about your life is it seems like you've kind of always, I guess if I go back to Teo's description at the beginning, you do redirects, meaning that you kind of quit before you get too committed with one thing, and there's never been necessary. I see you saying something. I'll stop in a sec.
No, it's a great point.
Where you've never held something that I know of that you have either identified with or truly actually loved and enjoyed, and had to be met with a dilemma of whether or not you should cease doing it. You've never had that moment, have you?
I don't think one necessarily comes to mind because I take a very non-committal approach to a lot of the things that I do, and I kind of just meander through things that interest me, and so I don't know why, but I've definitely kind of done that. But once I commit to something, I typically commit as much as I can up until the point that I'm like, this isn't really what I want to do, and then I'll redirect as best I can, I guess.
So if you don't mind, and I grab my psychology therapist notepad and put on my Sherlock hat.
Sure.
Sherlock hat.
I was going to say my psychology hat, and then I realized that I don't even know what that looks like, if that's even a thing. I don't think I've ever pictured a therapist.
Psychologists usually wear hats?
Have I ever seen a therapist
hat.
wear a hat?
I always just imagine Freud with a pipe.
Pipe.
Oh yeah, I'll get my pipe with my Sherlock hat because I've already put it on. Do you think that possibly the reason that is because you discovered the things that you like quite late in your life? Like you've kind of almost discovered the stuff that I know that you like to do. I basically, from my understanding, you've kind of only started exploring those interests in the last 6 or 8 months. So for example, you have your piano behind you and you've kind of only really started exploring music in the last 6 to 8 months. And from, if I'm just throwing words out there with absolutely no basis of fact or evidence, is it possible that you growing up, you might not have had the opportunity to explore things that you even might have possibly liked back then, and it just kind of happened to be that, I'm just kind of living my life through these motions because I have to survive, and then hey, now that I'm an adult with at least some spending money, I can now explore what my actual interests are.
Essentially I think you're spot on. I didn't, like, the high school that I went to, it didn't have a music program at all. So I think the only exposure to music that I really had before I was an adult was the recorder in grade 6 or 5 or 6, and I think everyone's had that experience, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So I had that, and then the high school, the other place where I moved away to, it just didn't have the funding. They had a drama faculty, but they couldn't afford band instruments. So yeah, I never had that exposure to music. So yeah, I would definitely say that it is an exposure thing.
Now, do you think that has a benefit, or do you think that was kind of like, in hindsight, an annoyance to your development that you found these things so late?
Oh my God. Talk about biggest regrets of my life. If I would have understood how much I like just to play around on the piano when I was 4, I think that my life now would be way different than what it is. And so I don't like to live with regrets. So I can't like, oh shit, like damn past me for not being a toddler and just having that autonomy to go pick up a ukulele and you know, show my parents that I liked it or something. You can't think like that. You just have to keep, you know, figuring out what you like and just pursue it, because that's really the only way that you can find some meaningful happiness, I think.